What's good, Celtics fans? Welcome back to the Vitamin C's with your daily dose of Celtics content. As usual, I'm your boy Adam Taylor, joined by my good friend, my co-host, my partner in Celtics crime, Mr. Tim Shields. What's going on today, Tim? How you doing, bro?
Nothing much, man. I finally pulled the trigger on NBA 2K and just excited. Hey, almost the end of the week and excited to talk more Celtics today.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm close to pulling that same trigger. It's just I'm not on the next gen. Like, I don't game enough to really buy next gen while they're at the premium price. So I'm probably going to end up buying it for Xbox One. But I'm just a bit put off by the fact that, most of the good updates have been made predominantly for next gen. So I'm a little bit skeptical on whether I want to do that. I know the badges upgrades have come through onto both
Mhm.
consoles, so maybe that'll make it worth it. Hopefully they've done some stuff to the My GM as well. But we're not here to talk 2K today. That'll probably be a tomorrow thing. We could, but probably not if we're being quite honest. What we are here to talk about, one reason that we have gathered ourselves today, is today's Grant Williams Day. We're going to discuss whether or not Grant Williams is going to find a resurge in his play, or he's going to be at the very end of the rotation and people are going to forget that he exists, similar to how it was with Carson Edwards last year before he decided to put us all on notice during Summer League, as usual. Where do you want to start, man? I mean, look, Grant Williams last year was poor. Playing at the four, he was getting cooked on the perimeter. His defense didn't look great. His footwork looked a bit slower than it had done in his rookie season. His basketball IQ okay, look at it this way: he had a great basketball IQ in his rookie year, and there was a point where people were calling him Baby Horford, very much like a low physical impact guy, but he makes the right play, makes the right reads, and can impact winning in a positive way. Fast forward to his second season in the league, and it's just all going to shit. I don't know how we feel about this. Like for me, I'm like, yo, Grant Williams, if he's not at the small ball five anymore, like if you're playing him at the four, I really don't know how sustainable that is at this point. And maybe that's just recency bias based off of his last season.
Yeah, well, I think that's also, recency bias is a huge play in here because we have to keep in mind sophomore slumps happen. Like that's a regular thing that happens at the NBA level where you have a guy who has a pretty solid rookie season or really good rookie season, and then their sophomore season they don't live up to those expectations. One guy that kind of happened with last season was Tyler Harrow. Like that happens to guys sometimes, and it's regular to see guys struggle. Especially we have to keep in mind this was a very trying season for just about everybody involved. So concerning Grant, I think offensively he was okay. Like his percentages in terms of his shooting percentages, we talked about it before we came on. Like his percentages weren't bad, but defensively is where he really got cooked. And he did struggle from the free throw line, but how much of that is mental, how much of that is just the season, and can he overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, I've just pulled up his basic stats here from Basketball Reference. We've all seen pages like this. We don't need to explain it too much. 58% from the line is super concerning. Look, when guys aren't hitting from the field, you can always tell whether or not their shot's going to come good based off the way their free throw percentage is. That's usually a good indicator of whether a guy can improve as a shooter or not. Now, this was quite a big regression, and it was on the same amount of attempts per game, which means that it isn't because he shot more, he scored less. It's simply just that was definitely a confidence thing, I think. To go from 72.2% as a rookie down to 58.8% as a sophomore, that's confidence to me. You don't get that much worse at shooting in a summer. I don't know what Grant had been working on. Maybe he just focused solely on his corner threes. I mean, you see that percentage jump there, increased volume just a little bit, and he's hitting 37.2% from free. I'm guaranteeing 85% of those were from the corners. That free throw shooting, I think, would be an anomaly. I think we'll see him closer to that 70-75% range this year if he gets the minutes to get to the line. I think that what we'll see as well is, well, what I would like to see is him use more as a facilitator. I want to see those assist numbers go up. He's not a play finisher by any means. He's an outlet guy. If the defense close in, you don't mind hitting Grant Williams in the corner and asking him to shoot that free. So where his value comes for me, outside of being a spot up guy, is being able to run some handoff actions or some elbow sets and act as a hub. And I think that playing alongside Al Horford this year is going to teach Grant Williams a lot about how he can use his body and his basketball IQ and positional skill set to actually be impactful. I'm not saying he's going to have much of a resurgence this year, but I do think that maybe under Ime Udoka he's going to be used a little bit differently. And Grant Williams to me still screams potential PJ Tucker in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if that's his potential, like, that's definitely worth holding on to. Like, that's a key guy that you could use in your bench rotation. And I think an important thing to keep in mind too, as well, like when talking about last season, specifically with the big man rotation, you saw double bigs a lot. So usually Tristan Thompson had to be at the five, or Rob Williams was at the five. And when the team went small, it was generally going to be Daniel Tice operating at the five, because that's really what Tice can do, is play small ball five. So for Grant right now, you look at the roster in terms of the other big men, like who's the only other guy who can play small ball five? It's probably going to be Jabari Parker, right? Like I can't think of anyone else unless I am totally blanking on someone. Like when they go smaller, like it's going to be one of those two options. And for Grant right now, like that's actually good, because I think Jabari is going to have like those bench minutes where like, hey, we need a couple buckets, we need a couple boards. They'll put him in. But I think like Grant could carve out a solid 18 to 20 minutes, because that's about what he was getting last year. So if you have those opportunities available and you try and put him in the position where he's comfortable, like the team is going to do a lot better. And it's funny that you mentioned the corner threes, because that's where he shot the best from behind the arc. From the left corner, he shot 16 to 35. So way over league average, almost 46%. And then from right wing, he was about 43%, 9 of 21. So those 3-point corner shots, like those are big. That's important to have that option. So his ability to stretch the floor along the baseline, like that's good, because he's going to be able to just be rear driving. Okay, you got to kick it out. Boom, Grant's in the corner. There's a really solid chance of that shot going in. And if he can keep up that level, work on the free throws, work on the confidence, and just whatever he needs to make to do on defense, like to make those adjustments, make it happen. Like you've got a solid rotational piece. I don't get why so many people are so low on him. Like I don't understand it. He's a sophomore year player. I don't know what you expect.
I think for me, it's like, and I agree. I just don't agree that he could carve out an 18 to 20 minute minute a night role. I just
Okay.
think that my personal opinion is I don't see the Celtics going small for that amount of time per game, personally. And I also think that if they do go small, they will run Jabari there as well. So I'd be looking more around the 10 to 12 minutes a night type of guy. The other thing I've got there is as well, you do have to fit in Enes Kanter before you start in some of these
Oh,
minutes as well.
yeah, that's true.
It's quite a deep rotation there. So, I mean, for me, the only way Grant's going to get that 18-minute type of area is if he shows value at four along with the small ball five. I just don't see Boston going that small like for that stretch of time every game. It's definitely going to be matchup dependent. It's going to be systematically based. For me, Grant Williams needs to show that, hey, I'm not a liability guarding the wing. I can move my feet quick enough to stay in front of guys or stay on their hip. I can make sure that when guys are driving at me, I draw the charge correctly, or I know how to hedge them to their weaker hand and force them weak side. If he can show those developments, well, now there's no reason you can't get minutes in that four rotation. Arguably, what then you're just kind of fighting with Hernan Gomez at that point, fighting a little bit with Jabari Parker, and maybe that's an easier battle to win than it is to fight against an Al Horford, Robert Williams, Enes Kanter rotation. Obviously, if they do want to go small, you can slide up from the four, but proving your value as a power forward is going to be one of the most logical steps in your third season as you try and recover from what was effectively a horrendous sophomore year.
Yeah, I mean, and we totally blanked. I blanked on Juancho, because Juancho is going to be added to that situation too. So like you could see him at the four, or maybe they run him at the five, but he's too much of a defensive liability. But that 4 to 5 spot is starting to get a little bit built now. So the question is like, is Grant in or is he out? And obviously with that sophomore season, like that's kind of like a bad taste in the mouth for a lot of people. Probably for Grant Williams too. Like I imagine that his confidence took like a massive hit, and it can't be good to have like fans talking about you that kind of way. Most people say like they want to get rid of him, but I still think there's potential there. And I agree. Like he has to be able to play the four. And that's really where he got cooked, right? Because of the way that the bigs were established last year, and you had Tristan Thompson, and you had Rob Williams having a breakout season, and you had Daniel Tice, who of course you had as a known commodity until the trade deadline when they moved on from him. But those were guys that were going to be ahead of him in the pecking order regardless. I think the only one that was questionable was Rob Williams, because a lot of his issues have been health related. But now that Rob is healthier and able to take on more minutes, all of a sudden Grant's like, okay, you're going to have to play the four. and he struggles with it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's conditioning, if he needs to slim down, or if he needs to bulk up, if he needs to muscle up. But something's got to change there. And I don't know if it's a matter of training or if it's just a matter of getting over those mental holds where it's like, okay, you're playing a different position now. Guys are going to be a little bit faster. You need to adjust. And he's got to work on it. I just don't know what it means like in terms of coaching.
I mean, for me, the other thing that I'm looking at is maybe you can play him at the free. Maybe with his size, you can ask him to play at the free a little bit. And then, I mean, if you look at this during his rookie season, he was played 38% as a small forward as a rookie. He spent more time at the free than he did at the five. And he was quite successful. You know, it was all like, and when we're looking at how Grant Williams actually performed, maybe it wasn't that he was getting cooked by faster players; it was by stronger players. So by sliding him down to the free, you remove that question of can he handle this strength, and more, we need you to be quick. We need you to lock and trail on guys and really put that pressure on from behind. And that stood out to me. 38% as a small forward compared to in your rookie year, compared to 9% in your sophomore year, and you go for a huge sophomore slump. Well, was that from the minutes that you were playing extra at the four and you were succeeding at the three the year before? There's always that kind of question you need to ask as well, because the fall off was extremely prominent.
And I wonder, like when you actually pull up the numbers and you look at that in terms of like the percentage split for minutes, I wonder if that's tied into Jason Tatum as well. Because Tatum last season, not this past 2020, 2021, but the year before, he put in a lot of minutes at power forward. But Boston ran with double bigs a lot last year. So like that might have changed up what they were asking from Grant as well. And the issue is, like you said, like it's, can Grant stay with small forwards? Can he keep up with them speed wise? Because that's going to be a matter of conditioning. But like if you're getting out muscled at the four and you're not really going to be an option at small ball five, and look at the percentages there, like 6 or 7% between the 2 years at the center spot. So maybe they do use him as a wing option. Like maybe that's a better case situation for him too.
I think that is the best option. I think just sliding in between the three and the five, finding out where you get the largest amount of impact, and then rolling with that and putting him in that position consistently is the only way. And it's going to be experimental, because some games he's going to match up better with a three than he is with a four or a five. Other games you're going to need him at the small ball, because therefore 3 and 4 are just going to cook him physically and athletically. And I think it is just finding out what Grant Williams' skill set is, what he brings to this team, and how you can accentuate that. And for me, that is very much what PJ Tucker went through during the early years of his career, and then he had to go abroad, discover more of who he was, and then come back to be this impactful 3-and-D guy. But Grant Williams needs to be used in a multitude of ways, in a multitude of roles, and asked to kind of figure out who he is as a player, and then really double down on that specific skill set. The only way to do that is trial and error.
And the question is whether or not Udoka is going to allow that to happen. Like we have to still keep in mind, these first 2 seasons have been under Brad Stevens. I'm interested to see what Udoka does, but I think with the Spurs background there too, like I think there's going to be, I think in terms of defense, in terms of having a guy who can pass, who can shoot the three, who's on the bigger side in terms of size, like I think there's going to be a role for him. I'm excited to see what's going to happen there, because I think Grant's capable of that. And being able to have him as like a guy you can turn to, especially when you look at small forward minutes as well as small ball 5 minutes, I just want something to click there, because I think for a long time coming, he's kind of been put in this bad spot. Night and day between rookie and sophomore season. Like I feel like rookie season, he was a lot more comfortable. Sophomore year, he was put in a bad spots where he wasn't comfortable. And for a rookie, like going into sophomore season, like there's probably pressure to try and outdo what you've already done. It just wasn't good for him. Like I just don't think it panned out well. And I'm hoping that a change of scenery like is not necessary to get that next level out of him.
Yeah, I don't think a change of scenery is necessary. I just genuinely believe it's a change of role. And I genuinely believe that if he doesn't figure it out this year, then he's done in Boston. I think that one good year, maybe you've got a little bit of encouragement going into the sophomore slump, you take it into year 3. I mean, the one thing to remember is this guy's earning what, 2.498, so 2.5 million a year. He was a late round pick. It's not exactly like you're losing out much. You had a good year of production from him. Expecting him to be this star or be this stud is so unfair on him because he was never drafted to be that guy. He's a
Yeah.
glue guy with a very specific skill set. And the challenge for the coaching team is to figure out how that skill set meshes with the rotation to get the best out of him. If you can't do it, then I think Grant Williams will have a long career in the NBA as a rotational piece. But if you can't figure it out, or his skill set doesn't fit with what you're trying to do as an offense and a defense, then move him on and let him continue to develop elsewhere and try and bring in an asset back that does fit more in with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, agreed on all counts. I do want to see how he develops. I think I think in terms of chemistry, he's also good. He seems like a guy that so many people like, and I think that's an important part of when you're trying to build out like a strong team with good chemistry and a good locker room. Like you want guys like that. And there's so many people he's friends with. Like you like look at like random things, it'll be like, oh yeah, Grant Williams like getting shouted out by like some big superstar. And it's like he's just friends with everybody. And that what that tells me is that he's a likable guy. He's fun to work with, and he runs those circles often. So I think that's an important factor to consider when you're looking at off the court value. But
Yeah, I think off the court value too is just as important. I think when you're talking about a glue guy, he's and if you remember when the summer that Grant Williams was drafted was the same summer that Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge made a big song and dance about bringing in high quality locker room presences. They'd just gone through that whole Kyrie thing. The Terry Rozier thing had just happened where Terry's gone, Kyrie's gone. You're coming off the back of a season where the locker room issues were one of the most reported things throughout the entire year. There was discontent amongst Jalen and Jason, apparently. So the front office made a very concerted effort that everyone we bring in is a high character quality person. And Grant Williams fit that bill perfectly. But people forget about that because he had a good year on the floor too. But he is, again, a glue guy as in terms of he's a great locker room presence. He talks a bunch. He keeps everybody entertained. If he can find some form of consistency on the defensive end and the offensive end. Now he's one of the most valuable 10th to 12th men in a rotation that you can possibly have because he's such a great human being off the floor. And I think that holds a bunch of value too. And it will be something other teams take note of because bringing a guy in that's got a ceiling of like, his ultimate ceiling of like a PJ Tucker 3-and-D type guy that comes in and uplifts the locker room, where that holds value within itself. It's just at the moment he's not putting the product on the floor to match the how can I word this? The impact he has within the locker room morale.
yeah, and it's just a matter of making those two ends meet, basically. I think we'll see what happens. I think Grant still has that value there, and I think overall, if you put him in a position to succeed, I think that he will. Um, he's too smart of a player to not. Like I think a lot of players, like you look at, like there's physical talent, and they oftentimes is saying of like you can't teach height. So like there are guys that get drafted based on their athletic potential, and while it's not like Grant is inathletic or something like that, a lot of it's based on his IQ and his ability to be that kind of guy in a locker room. So like you're drafting him for his presence off the court, what he brings to a team in terms of chemistry and glue, and also just he's a smart guy. Smart players are important because they're going to know what plays to make next. They think ahead, like processing speed in terms of like, okay, where do I need to be on this play? Okay, who do I need to pass it to in order to get a bucket here? Like those are things that smarter players think of. Like basketball IQ is incredibly important when you're looking at guys who are coming in off the rotations, like guys who are going to be part of your bench unit. Because if you got a bunch of guys out there who don't really think about that and it's more of a me first sort of thing, it just doesn't end up well. I think Grant is one of those guys that will definitely mesh in a locker room somewhere if the Celtics choose to move on from him. And I think that would be a mistake. Like I think he deserves Semi Ojeleye got all the chances of the world. I think you need to give Grant a lot of time. Like I think it's just a given.
Yeah, I think you talk about the processing speed, and like the way to think about that is if it takes you 4 seconds to recognize there's a guy open and it takes Grant Williams 1.8 seconds to recognize a guy's open, then that's what we're talking about processing speed. It's seeing the advantage and then acting on that advantage. So boom, he's open and pass, bang. Other guys will be like, oh, he's open, I should pass him the ball. It's that type of mentality. And Grant Williams has shown high levels of floor recognition, understanding when to screen, when to roll, when to go screen, when to pop, when to cut, when to stand pat. He has that positional IQ, but that's all offensive. Defensively, in his rookie year, he was being put in positions where he could use his strength and get underneath guys. It make no bones about this. His best games last season came against slower, more physically dominant bigs. His best game of the season was by far and large that game against the Nuggets, where he really put a number on Jokic. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so you know now that maybe the strength isn't an issue, but maybe speed and strength is what really messes him up. That athletic ability, he struggles there. So you need to find where to slot him in against who to really benefit from his positional IQ. Otherwise, he needs to watch Al Horford and realize, like, hey, I don't need to be as fast as these guys. I just need to be able to cut off angles, take them away from their spots. That's just as valuable. So there's definitely a learning curve for Grant. And I think last year he would have realized that, hey, there's a bunch to learn on the way I can manipulate a defender's trajectory based on where I position my body. And hopefully that's been what he's gone away and worked on this summer.
Yeah, and that just sounds like kind of like a when you put it that way, it sounds like you're talking about like a vet in terms of like savviness. Like, oh, he knows when to make the pass, he knows when to make the right play. Like he's always in the right spot. He knows how to like switch onto a man. Like he always knows when to do this and this. Like those are the kind of players that you want. Like when you're talking about your rotations, like, oh yeah, we just added like a great glue guy. He comes in and does all this stuff. Like, oh, he brings his
Unfortunately,
heart out
man,
to work.
unfortunately, basketball's played on both sides of the floor. And if you're great on offense and your defense is poor, unless you're like a super sharp shooter, like a Duncan Robinson type, then you're not really going to get the minutes that you need to improve.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that's why I always look at what is their defensive baseline as a rookie. What is their defensive baseline in their sophomore season? Because that defense is what's going to earn you minutes. You can have a massive shooting slump for 10 games, but if your defense is on point, you might lose a few minutes, but you're not getting yanked from the rotation. On the other hand, you could be on a tear offensively, but if you're just an absolute turnstile on defense, you're probably going to get yanked after a game or two, because if you're scoring 12 points a game but letting up 20, well, you might as well not be on the floor then, because you're a net negative and somebody else might be able to hold a guy to 9 or 11. So there is a lot for Grant to develop. And I genuinely think that he has the personality type to recognize that and attack that development. So I'm looking forward to seeing him this upcoming season, man.
Yeah,
I
likewise.
think I think that's us for the daily dose, dude. Otherwise, we're just gonna go in circles as usual. There's a subscribe button. It's red. It says subscribe. Hit that button. I'm very grateful when you do. Tim's very grateful when you do. We will be back tomorrow for another dose, another daily dose of your vitamins. You've just reminded me I need to take my vitamin. So we will catch you again tomorrow. And until then, subscribe, share, like, tell us we're amazing. We'll tell you you guys are great. Peace out.
Cheers.